July 29, 1944, Normandy, France. The dawn fog still clung to the shattered hedgerows, muffling the sounds of distant gunfire. A lone Sherman tank, its olive paint scorched and its turret jammed halfway off-center, sat in the ruins of a French orchard. Smoke leaked from a cracked exhaust pipe. Inside, 4 men waited in silence, listening, breathing, praying. Ahead of them, across a narrow field, 3 German Panzers advanced in formation, black crosses glinting through the mist. Their engines rumbled like an oncoming storm. The Germans had seen the Sherman earlier. They laughed. A crippled tank, turret locked, no threat at all. But what they didn't know was that inside that broken Sherman, its gunner had re-rigged the elevation gear by hand. Its loader had pre-stacked shells in the breech. And its commander had spotted something the Panzers hadn't. A thin gap between the trees, perfectly aligned for a killing shot. In less than 1 minute, the battlefield would learn what desperation and ingenuity could do to be why the summer of 1944, the Allied war machine had pushed deep into France. Operation Overlord had broken Hitler's Atlantic Wall, and the beaches of Normandy were no longer the slaughter fields of early June. Yet, for every mile the Allies gained inland, the fight became more desperate and more personal. The enemy was not retreating in chaos. The Wehrmacht, though battered, was disciplined, and the Panzer divisions were still among the most feared weapons on earth. Their steel monsters, the Panther, the Tiger, and the Panzer IV, dominated the open plains and narrow lanes of Normandy. Against them stood thousands of American M4 Shermans. They were fast, reliable, and produced in staggering numbers. But they were also cursed with a reputation, one born from brutal reality. Shermans burned easily. Their armor was thin compared to the 88mm cannons of the Tigers or the long-barreled 75s of the Panthers. German crews mockingly called them Tommy Cookers or Ronsons, after a lighter brand that always lit the first time. It was not just propaganda. In the hedgerows of France, where visibility was measured in meters and ambushes could come from any direction, many Sherman crews never saw the shot that killed them. Still, the Sherman had something the German tanks didn't: reliability, speed, and logistics. It could travel farther without breaking down. Its parts were interchangeable across divisions. And when destroyed, it could be replaced within days, not weeks. This made the Sherman not a duelist's weapon, but a soldier's companion. It was built for movement, not glory. Where the German tanks hunted in small elite packs, the Shermans rolled forward as a relentless tide. In late July, as part of Operation Cobra, the U.S. First Army under General Omar Bradley prepared to break out of the Normandy hedgerows and open the road to Brittany. The German lines, though weakened by relentless bombing, still held key defensive points, particularly near Saint-Lô and Coutances. One of these points was held by elements of the 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich, supported by armored detachments from the Panzer-led division. Their tanks, mostly Panthers and Panzer IVs, were seasoned veterans of the Eastern Front. Their crews had survived Kursk and Kharkov. They knew how to fight tanks. Facing them were American armored units from the 3rd Armored Division and the 2nd Armored Division, nicknamed Hell on Wheels. Their Shermans came in waves, often outnumbering the German Panzers 3 or 4 to 1, but still outgunned in every one-on-one fight. Amid this grinding advance, stories began to emerge of small tank crews performing impossible feats. Not through luck, but through improvisation, battlefield ingenuity born of survival. One of those stories began in a quiet field near the town of Percy. A Sherman from the 2nd Armored Division had been hit by a German shell the previous day. The blast had jammed its turret ring and damaged its hydraulic traverse system, making it impossible to turn the gun. The rest of its platoon had moved forward, leaving the crew behind. But the commander refused to abandon it. The tank was not burning, the engine still ran, and the main gun, though fixed, could still fire. In theory, it was useless. In practice, it was about to make history. The Germans, spotting the stranded Sherman through the morning mist, assumed it was finished. They advanced without caution. What happened next would challenge every assumption about the so-called inferior Sherman, and prove that in war, adaptability could outweigh armor. The countryside around Percy was a labyrinth of narrow roads, orchards, and thick hedgerows. Each field was bordered by earthen embankments and tangled brush, the bocage of Normandy. To the infantry, these walls provided cover. To tank crews, they were death traps. Visibility was short. Maneuvering was slow. Every turn could reveal a hidden gun. Shermans, designed for open movement, struggled in this landscape. Their tall profiles made them easy targets. Their thin lower hulls were exposed when cresting over hedgerows. Yet, the Allies pressed forward, because they had no choice. Operation Cobra's success depended on speed. Every delay meant more German reinforcements arriving from the south. By July 28, 1944, the U.S. 2nd Armored Division had advanced toward Percy under heavy opposition from Panzer Le. The Germans were retreating but not broken. They used the terrain to delay and punish. Their tanks, mostly Panthers, operated from hidden positions, firing at long range, then withdrawing before counterfire could reach them. The Sherman tank in this story belonged to Company C, 67th Armored Regiment. Its name, like many Shermans, was painted in white on the hull, Courageous. The previous day, a Panzer IV had caught it in an ambush at less than 300 meters. The German round struck the Sherman's front right side, glancing off but bending the turret ring out of alignment. The shockwave jammed the traverse system solid. Miraculously, the crew survived. The commander, Lieutenant Robert Daniels, a 25-year-old from Ohio, ordered the men to hold position until the mechanics could reach them. But no recovery team came. Communications were down, and the battle line had surged past them. By dawn, they were stranded, one tank, isolated in enemy country. Inside, the crew faced a grim choice: abandon the vehicle and attempt to rejoin their unit on foot, or stay and fight in a disabled tank. Daniels chose to stay. His reasoning was simple. The Germans were still in the area. A moving target, even a broken one, could distract them long enough for others to survive. The Sherman's main gun, a 75mm M3, could still be fired manually. Daniels and his gunner, Corporal James Jimmy Riker, began to improvise. With the turret jammed, they used the entire hull as their aiming system, turning the tank itself to adjust direction. The loader, Private McNally, stacked shells within reach. The driver, Sergeant Frank Ellis, prepared the engine for quick rotation. Every movement would now be manual. Every shot, a gamble. Across the field, a German reconnaissance unit spotted the Sherman through the haze. They radioed to nearby armor, 3 Panzers from the Das Reich division, to finish it. What they didn't realize was that Daniel's crew had already calculated the only approach route across the open ground. They couldn't rotate their turret, but they didn't need to. The German tanks would have to pass directly into their firing arc. At this point in the war, most German crews viewed the Sherman as an inferior machine. Its 75mm gun couldn't reliably penetrate the Panther's sloped armor from the front. German commanders considered it a second-rate opponent, deadly in numbers, but weak alone. And yet, that arrogance, that small moment of underestimation, would cost them dearly. Because while German engineers had perfected armor and firepower, the Americans had mastered speed and logistics. In Normandy's hedgerows, where engagement ranges shrank to less than 500 meters, the difference between life and death wasn't armor thickness, it was who fired first. The courageous crew knew this. With 1 firing arc, 1 jammed turret, and 3 enemy tanks closing in, they prepared not for survival, but for precision. The stage was set. The German tanks rolled forward through the orchard, unaware that the crippled Sherman was still alive, and waiting. The Sherman was never built to be the strongest tank. It was built to win a global war. That distinction defined every decision behind its design, and every battle it fought. When the M4 Sherman entered service in 1942, it wasn't revolutionary. It was practical. It could be mass-produced, shipped across oceans, repaired in the field, and driven by men who had never seen combat 6 months before. That was its hidden genius. It worked everywhere, for everyone. German tanks were masterpieces of engineering. The Panther and Tiger were lethal, but they were also complex, heavy, and fragile. Each needed precise maintenance, specialized tools, and skilled crews. The Sherman, by contrast, was forgiving. Its radial aircraft engine, the Continental R975, could run even when damaged. Its transmission could be fixed with basic parts. It wasn't elegant, but it survived. In Normandy, that philosophy mattered more than perfection. The narrow, muddy lanes clogged with wreckage punished the over-engineered. Heavy German tanks bogged down, overheated, or broke tracks. The Shermans, lighter and faster, kept moving. Yet in combat, German superiority seemed absolute. A Panzer's 75mm high-velocity gun could destroy a Sherman from over 1,500 meters, while the Sherman often had to close to within 500 meters to have a chance. It seemed suicidal. So American tankers learned to adapt. They stopped trying to duel. They started hunting in teams, one tank drawing fire, others flanking. They learned to use artillery, air cover, and infantry coordination as part of the same system. The Sherman became not an individual warrior, but a node in a vast network of combined arms. That shift, from isolated duels to coordinated warfare, was the Allies' true advantage. By mid-1944, the U.S. Army had integrated rapid radio communication into every vehicle. Every Sherman had a radio. Many German tanks didn't. In the chaos of combat, this meant one crucial thing: American crews could react faster. In the case of the courageous, even though their radio had been damaged, the doctrine still lived in their behavior. Lieutenant Daniels and his crew acted not as isolated soldiers, but as a single component of a system, trained to fight with procedure, discipline, and adaptation. Technically, their chances were grim. The 75mm M3 gun could penetrate the side armor of a Panzer IV, but against a Panther or Tiger, it needed perfect conditions: short range, direct hit, soft spot. The courageous had only armor-piercing and high-explosive rounds remaining. No specialized ammunition, no armor upgrades. But they had one thing the Germans didn't: a faster reload cycle. The Sherman's gun breech and loading mechanism were lighter and simpler. A trained crew could fire every 6 to 8 seconds, nearly twice as fast as the Panther. In a close-range fight, that rate could be decisive. Daniels knew this. He had drilled his men relentlessly on reload speed. Even with the turret jammed, their system remained: gunner calls target, loader anticipates shell, commander adjusts hull angle. It was mechanical teamwork, not just gunnery. The U.S. Army's tank manuals of 1944 were clear on one principle: shoot first, shoot fast, and keep shooting until the enemy burns. That was the essence of the Sherman's doctrine: overwhelm through tempo. The Germans, on the other hand, relied on precision. They fired fewer rounds, but each was expected to kill. That worked perfectly in long-range engagements. But in Normandy's tight hedgerows, the advantage inverted. Visibility rarely exceeded 400 meters. Engagements were decided in seconds. In that kind of fight, the Panther's perfect optics and heavy gun meant less. What mattered was reaction time: who could line up, load, and fire faster. And now, as the Panzers approached, Daniels' broken Sherman held the one advantage they could never calculate: the element of surprise. From their perspective, the tank ahead was dead. Its gun faced north, slightly offset, harmless. The Germans advanced in a staggered line formation, confident, laughing even through the static of their intercoms. Inside the Sherman, Daniels waited. His driver's hands gripped the control levers. The gunner's eye stayed fixed on the periscope slit. The loader braced his hands around the next shell. All they needed was for the first Panzer to move into the field's edge, exactly where the firing arc aligned. That was the hidden brilliance of Daniels' plan. With a jammed turret, he had transformed weakness into precision. The gun could not turn, but that meant it could not lose its aim either. The Panzers entered the kill zone, one after another. And with that, the myth of the weak Sherman was about to face its reckoning. Every tank was a machine of steel and fire. But its true weapon was the crew. In the end, the Sherman's fate, and that of every man inside it, depended less on its armor than on the calmness of 5 soldiers under unbearable pressure. Inside Courageous, the air was heavy with heat and oil fumes. The smell of cordite from yesterday's near hit still lingered. Each man moved in tight, disciplined motions. They had been together for months, through Corentin, through St. Lo. They had buried friends, patched holes, and learned to trust each other's instincts more than orders. Lieutenant Robert Daniels wasn't a hero by temperament. He was quiet, methodical, more engineer than warrior. He understood the Sherman's mechanics like a living organism. That understanding kept his men alive. When the turret jammed, it wasn't panic that took over, it was problem-solving. He knew that fear killed faster than fire. Sergeant Frank Ellis, the driver, was the muscle of the machine. Steady hands on the control levers, nerves wired for motion. His job was no less deadly than the gunners. Every turn of the tracks could mean the difference between being in cover or in a Panzer's sights. The loader, Private McNally, barely 20, had grown from a nervous recruit into the heartbeat of the gun. He could seat a shell, close the breech, and clear the chamber in seconds, all in pitch darkness or shaking chaos. And then there was Corporal Riker, the gunner. His world was the periscope, a narrow rectangle of light, smoke, and motion. His heart rate slowed when he aimed. His breathing synced with the recoil of the gun. In those seconds before firing, he entered a silence that no battle could break. This was the rhythm of a tank crew, mechanical unity, each man trusting the others to function like clockwork under fire. Across the field, the German tankers of Das Reich Division lived under a different code. Their training was elite, their discipline absolute. The Panther was their pride, a machine they treated almost as sacred. Its optics were the finest in Europe. Its gun could punch through Allied armor like paper. But the German crews were exhausted. Many had fought since 1943. Normandy was not the battlefield they knew. The hedgerows nullified their range advantage. Every shot now came down to instinct, not doctrine. To them, the Sherman was prey. Its destruction was routine. The Panther crews joked over their radios when they saw one immobilized, another burning coffin. It was gallows humor masking fatigue. They had seen too many friends die under Allied air attacks, too many fuel convoys bombed before reaching the front. The German army in France was bleeding out, but pride still drove them. What neither side could see, in that moment, was how similar they were. Both were young men trapped in steel boxes, fighting for survival in a war designed by older men. The difference lay in mindset. German doctrine emphasized perfection, perfect gunnery, perfect machines, perfect control. The American doctrine emphasized resilience, adaptability, teamwork, the ability to fight with whatever remained. The courageous crew embodied that doctrine. They didn't have the best tank, but they had the right mentality. Improvise, endure, and never stop firing. Daniel's decision to stay and fight was not bravado. It was tactical reasoning under emotional strain. He understood that abandoning the tank would make them targets anyway. Staying gave them a purpose, a role to play in a larger battle that none of them could see but all of them served. And deep inside that battered Sherman, fear turned into focus. When soldiers talked later about luck on the battlefield, they often misunderstood what they were seeing. Luck in war was rarely random. It was the product of men who were ready when the impossible happened. That readiness, the ability to keep thinking when everything went wrong, was the soul of the Sherman crews. They were called inferior by their enemies, expendable by their commanders, yet they became the iron heart of Allied progress. In that orchard near Percy, 4 Americans sat in silence, surrounded by 3 approaching Panzers. The world had shrunk to the view through a cracked periscope and the whisper of a commander's voice over the intercom. Steady. Wait for it. The German laughter echoed faintly over the field. The loader's hand hovered over the shell. The driver's foot pressed on the clutch. The gunner's finger found the trigger. And in that final second before the shot, the human and the machine became one. The fog lifted just enough to reveal movement. Through the cracked periscope, Corporal Riker saw the first Panther emerging from the tree line, dark, angular, its 75mm gun scanning left to right. Behind it, 2 more followed, staggered, cautious but confident. Their commander's cupola hatch was open. A figure stood tall, binoculars raised. He was laughing, relaxed, unhurried. To him, the Sherman ahead was no threat. Inside Courageous, the air vibrated with tension. The men didn't speak. Every movement was mechanical, rehearsed. Lieutenant Daniels watched through the commander's slit. The Germans were moving at roughly 6 kilometers per hour, crossing 200 meters of open ground. The lead Panther would enter their fixed firing arc in seconds. Driver, hold position. Loader, AP ready. Gunner, sight low, hull level. The words came out calm, measured. The loader slammed the 75mm armor-piercing shell into the breech. Metal clanged. The gun locked. The Panther commander raised his arm, signaling advance. At 160 meters, Daniels whispered, "On my mark." The gunner's eye narrowed behind the sight. The crosshair settled on the thin lower plate beneath the Panther's sloped armor, one of its few weak spots. Mark! The Sherman fired. The blast shook the hull. The recoil slammed through the crew's bones. Smoke filled the cabin. The shell struck low, exactly where Riker aimed. For half a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the Panther shuddered. A burst of flame erupted from its engine compartment. The German crew inside had no time to react. The shell had ricocheted upward into the fuel lines. "Hit!" shouted McNally, his voice drowned by the echo. Through the slit, Daniels saw the Panther lurch sideways, black smoke pouring from the rear deck. But there was no time to celebrate. The second Panther had halted and fired. The shell screamed overhead, a thunderous near miss. The explosion tore a crater behind them, showering dirt onto the Sherman's hull. The concussion rattled loose bolts inside the turret. "Adjust 3 degrees right," Daniels ordered. Ellis jammed the left track lever, rotating the entire tank by brute force. The engine groaned, metal grinding against metal. "Loader, next shell." "Up." McNally slammed another round in. The second shot came faster, instinct, not calculation. Riker aimed for the gun mantlet of the second Panther. The round struck square, ricocheted, but caught the turret ring. The German gun froze halfway through rotation. Sparks flared from its gears. The Panther was wounded, not destroyed, but blind. The third German tank broke formation, swinging wide to flank. Its commander, realizing the trap, barked orders over the radio. The laughter was gone now. The dead Sherman had become a hunter. Daniels knew they had seconds before being surrounded. "Driver, reverse 10. Keep the hull in line." The tank backed into the hedgerow, branches scraping across its armor. Riker stayed on the site, searching through smoke. The second Panther was trying to turn its hull, to bring its gun back online. Fire again. The third round fired, a perfect strike into the already damaged turret ring. The Panther erupted. Its hatch blew open. A figure crawled out, engulfed in smoke. The third German tank opened fire immediately. The round hit short, exploding against the dirt mound in front of Courageous. Shrapnel pinged off the hull like rain. The crew flinched but didn't break. Inside the Sherman, Daniels' voice was calm, almost detached. "AP. 1 left." "1 round left," McNally confirmed. His hands were trembling but steady. Daniels looked through the slit again. The third Panther was closing, too close now. 120 meters. He could see the muzzle flash. "Brace." The German shell hit the Sherman's left front corner. The shock threw them all sideways. The hull screamed as steel warped. One headlight shattered. The periscope cracked fully. Smoke filled the cabin. The gunner coughed, eyes stinging. "Still mobile." Ellis shouted from below. Daniels wiped the soot from his eyes. "Target, last Panther. Hull shot. Make it count." The gunner's voice came low, almost a growl. "On target." McNally slammed the final shell in, his last. The Panther was turning slightly, showing its side plate, a fatal moment of vulnerability. "Fire." The Sherman's final shot thundered through the orchard. The shell hit the Panther square in the side, just behind the road wheels. For a second, there was silence. Then a flash. Then a bloom of orange and black that consumed the tank from within. The explosion rolled across the field, shaking the air. The German machine ground to a halt, engine whining, then dying. 3 Panzers. 3 shots. Inside courageous, the crew sat motionless, deafened by the concussions. Only the faint ticking of cooling metal filled the silence. Riker exhaled slowly. "We're still here." Daniels nodded once. Outside, the smoke cleared enough for them to see the wrecks. 3 German tanks, burning quietly in the mist. The field that had begun as a death sentence was now a graveyard, but not theirs. For a long moment, no one moved. The smoke drifted low across the field, mixing with the morning fog. Flames hissed from the wrecked Panthers, black columns curling upward into the grey Normandy sky. The sound of burning oil filled the air, thick and unnatural. Inside courageous, the crew sat in stunned quiet. Only the faint hum of the idling engine broke the stillness. Their ears rang from the concussion of their own gunfire. Corporal Riker lifted his head from the gun sight, blinking hard. That's 3, he murmured, as if trying to believe his own words. Lieutenant Daniels didn't answer immediately. His hand rested on the cracked intercom switch, his eyes fixed on the field outside. The German tanks, invincible by reputation, unstoppable by design, now lay scattered like fallen giants. One of the German crewmen stumbled out of a burning turret, his uniform torn, face blackened with soot. He took 2 steps into the open air and collapsed to his knees. None of the Americans fired. There was no need. The battle was over. Daniels finally spoke, his voice level but low. "Check ammo." "Out," McNally replied softly. "That was the last one." The lieutenant nodded. "Then we hold position. Eyes up." He knew better than to celebrate. In Normandy, victory was temporary. The next shell, the next Stuka, the next hidden gun, all could erase what they'd just done. But for this minute, they were alive. Riker wiped his hands on his soot-blackened uniform, glancing at the scorched paint on the interior walls. "Broken turret," he said, half smiling through exhaustion. "Guess it wasn't such a problem after all." Ellis, still gripping the driver's controls, gave a dry laugh. "Guess not." Outside, the heat from the burning Panthers warped the air, distorting the view like a mirage. The smell of fuel and iron was overpowering. The orchard that had been peaceful hours before was now a tableau of destruction. Twisted steel, scattered track links, the remnants of 3 of Germany's finest machines. For a tank crew, such scenes were rare. The Sherman was not built for kill streaks. It was built for endurance, to move forward even when others stopped. Yet this crippled tank had done what entire platoons sometimes fail to do: destroy 3 enemy tanks without a single reload cycle. That kind of result spread fast. Within hours, nearby U.S. infantry patrols discovered the smoking wrecks. They found the Sherman still idling, its crew repairing their radio and scanning the horizon. Reports were filed, relayed, and questioned. When the mechanics arrived, they found the turret still jammed solid, the hydraulic system fused. The gun could not move even an inch. One of the officers reportedly asked Daniels, "How the hell did you do it?" The lieutenant's reply was quiet, almost indifferent: "We didn't move the gun. We moved the tank." The story spread through the armored division like wildfire. The broken Sherman that killed 3 Panzers. Some dismissed it as luck. Others called it a miracle. But those who examined the ground saw the truth: precision, patience, and tactical awareness. Each German tank had been caught in a perfect line of fire. The field itself became evidence of Daniels' calculation. The Sherman's immobility had forced discipline. No waste, no rush, no panic. Every shot was deliberate. In later reports from the 2nd Armored Division, the event was logged as a confirmed engagement, with estimated enemy losses of 3 tanks and several infantry casualties. Daniels and his crew received unit commendations, though no medals beyond the routine. To them, survival was enough. But to others, the lesson was clear. The Sherman's weakness had concealed a deeper strength: the capacity of its crews to think under fire. Across the German lines, survivors from the Das Reich detachment were stunned. Their reports mentioned an immobilized American tank that fired multiple accurate shots from a fixed position. They assumed it had been part of an artillery trap. None could believe a jammed Sherman had done it alone. This disbelief revealed something profound about the war's psychology. The Germans, conditioned to see technical superiority as invincibility, could not imagine defeat from improvisation. The Americans, raised on adaptability, made it a weapon. As the smoke settled, the courageous crew finally shut down their engine. Daniels climbed through the commander's hatch, his uniform streaked with grime. He stood on the scorched armor, surveying the wreckage. The orchard was silent now, only the crackle of burning fuel and the distant drone of Allied aircraft overhead. He didn't smile. He didn't raise a fist. He simply looked at the field and whispered, "Let's go home." The mechanics would later tow Courageous back to the division's repair area. The tank would never fight again. Its turret ring was beyond recovery. But its story would travel with the division, whispered among crews as proof that even a broken machine could change the course of a fight. In a war where legends were forged from tragedy, this one was forged from ingenuity. And as the Allies pushed deeper into France, the lesson of that morning would echo in countless engagements, that courage was not measured by armor thickness or gun caliber, but by the will to keep fighting when the odds said not to. By early August 1944, the Normandy front was a study in contradictions, vast Allied success on paper, yet fierce local resistance on every hedgerow. Each field, each farmhouse, was a fortress. And amid that chaos, stories like Lieutenant Daniels' broken Sherman began to circulate through the ranks. Quiet tales whispered around mess tents and motor pools. The battle reports described it clinically: 1 M4 tank, mechanical failure, turret jammed, destroyed 3 enemy armored vehicles at 600 yards. No embellishment. No drama. Yet the men who read it felt something stir, a rare glimmer of pride in a war that often reduced them to statistics.